Kagurabachi. It's either a name you're extremely familiar with or one that you've never heard of. Kagurabachi had a very unusual start to its serialization as a manga. However, I don't mean unusual in how the narrative began. In fact, that's actually quite the opposite. Kagurabachi's narrative is quite easy to pick up on as soon as you start reading. The audience follows the main protagonist, Chihiro, as he uses his enchanted katana to try and hunt down the people who murdered his father. As far as main plot points go, Kagurabachi's isn't the most thematically complex, but it is definitely compelling. It sets the series tone immediately. We, as the audience, now have to expect that lives are on the line here, and people are going to die. So, while the narrative isn't anything game-changing, that isn't what's unnecessarily unusual. I mean, as far as shonen battle manga go, it's pretty average. What's unusual about Kagurabachi's beginning is its absolutely bizarre online presence. Let's go back a couple of years, right to when the series first began. September 19th, 2023. Kagurabachi, being a shonen battle manga, meant that there would already be a larger portion of eyes on the series. But instead of the usual first chapter release of a new series, where people would just be talking and gauging whether it would be the next big thing, Kagurabachi turned into the largest meme on the internet. Why? Literally, who knows? I mean, as with everything, the meme just started with one person. Now, I wasn't able to find the exact first post, which started the avalanche of memes, but on screen, I will flash up several examples of said memes.
Wow!
It was the largest thing of that month, and with only one chapter out, the future seemed extremely bright for the budding manga series. It was a dream start. Millions of people on the internet were being exposed to Kagurabachi. However, no one was actually talking about the contents of the series, only the one or two panels that were being memed. So interest didn't necessarily carry over into the long run. Now, it's 2025 and over 90 plus manga chapters have been released, and I have read every single one of them. So, the question at large here is Kagurabachi actually a good shonen battle manga? Or was it just lucky enough to become one of the biggest memes on the planet? Well, that's actually an interesting question, because on the one hand, I do believe the series does have the makings of a great shonen battle manga, but on the other hand, there are most definitely issues I have with what's been published so far. Like every shonen battle manga, Kagurabachi is foot on the gas action with a solid narrative trailing comfortably behind. And to be honest, if you're reading a shonen manga, you're not necessarily reading for the narrative. You're reading for the cool power-ups and cool fight scenes. Not to say all people are just reading for the action, but a majority of the shonen fan base most definitely are. So, does Kagurabachi's action satisfy that known shonen itch? It absolutely does. Some of the fight scenes in the series are so fluid and dynamic that sometimes it doesn't even feel like I'm reading, but just straight up watching an anime. And the art is at times mesmerizing, with some of the coolest spreads I've ever seen in manga. The main protagonist, Chihiro, and his enchanted goldfish katana, Enten, are really cool and provide a sort of Demon Slayer-esque vibe with the swordplay. And almost every side character, especially Shiba, has a unique way of fighting, so the action doesn't ever get boring. However, I do have issues with the power system. Power systems are the backbone of a battle shonen. They're the rules by which every character follows, and while some are wildly unique, like Nen and Ryatsu, the others, not so much. Kagurabachi's power system unfortunately falls under that not so unique category. Now that's not me calling it bad by any means. In fact, it's actually kind of the opposite. Kagurabachi's power system is very similar to a handful of different popular series. How it works is as such. Every individual person has what is known as spirit energy. This energy acts as a sort of life force. Through training and discipline, and on the very rare occurrence, near-death experiences, a person can learn to harness their spirit energy into strengthening their body, and most importantly, they can also learn to use sorcery. These individuals who can use sorcery are referred to as, you guessed it, sorcerers. Okay, let's play a little game. All you have to do is listen to the question and pick one out of the 4 options as your answer. Sound simple enough? Okay, here's the question. What other power systems is Kagurabachi's power system reminiscent of? A. Cursed energy from JJK. B. Chakra from Naruto and Naruto Shippuden. C. Nen from Hunter x Hunter. Or D. All of the above. If you guessed D, all of the above, then you would be correct. And for getting that answer right, you get a singular penny. So please spend that wisely. But yes, Kagurabachi's power system is quite simple, and it is reminiscent of a handful of popular shonen manga. But that's not the biggest issue in the world, because of one specific thing: the enchanted katanas. Forged by Chihiro's dad, the enchanted katanas are what the entire series revolves around. There are 7 different blades, which all have unique and fascinating abilities. Each is powerful in its own right. Any user who wields one of these 7 katanas is immediately one of the most powerful individuals in the world, and every person within the story is highly aware of this fact. These things are really cool in my opinion, because weapons in shonen don't necessarily ever play large roles in the plot. Of course, Bleach and Demon Slayer are outliers here, because almost everyone has a sword in those stories. My point is that these swords feel highly unique, and not just to one person. Technically, anyone could use the swords if the circumstances were correct. They feel like artifacts that the world revolves around. So yes, while the power system is a bit one-dimensional, the sorcery is never actually the main focus of the battles. Sometimes this is the case in battles not featuring one of the katanas, but most of the time, the katanas are the star of the show. Okay, I've talked about this power system long enough. What about the actual narrative? Is that any good? Yeah, as far as battle shonen go, it's pretty good. I obviously wouldn't expect Vinland Saga levels of storytelling, but from what I've read, Kagurabachi is a pretty solid and compelling narrative. As I mentioned previously, the audience follows Chihiro on his quest to avenge the death of his father. Yes, this is a pretty common trope within media, but I gotta be honest, I was really getting into it with Kagurabachi. The author, Takeru Hakazono.
That's what I'm talking about! That's why he's the MVP! That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
Does an extremely good job of not leaning on Chihiro's want for revenge too heavily. We as an audience know that Chihiro's main goal is to kill the people who murdered his father, but we aren't consistently reminded of it. Instead, there are well-placed flashbacks with Chihiro and his dad, giving the reader an insight into why Chihiro cherishes his father so much. These flashbacks also lead into some really cool ideological questions, which I was entirely not expecting from this series. But Chihiro does go through the mental obstacle of questioning the katanas his father made, questioning who gets to be worthy of them and what they truly represent. And a lot of the times, he has to acknowledge the fact that these weapons aren't just for protecting people, but also killing them as well. Ultimately, this leads to Chihiro's goal not just being a one-dimensional quest for revenge, but a task of understanding the purpose of his father's work. This makes his motivations more compelling, and is honestly one of the main reasons I kept reading. Chihiro, as the main protagonist, is a very stoic character. He's very calm and cool under pressure. He's got a cool black trench coat, and he's got a cool scar. He's pretty much the quintessential cool guy, if that makes sense. And I know every cool edgy guy in anime gets compared to Sasuke, specifically in Shippuden, but I gotta be that guy and say Chihiro really does remind me of Sasuke. Yes, it's another case of another common trope in media where one character is the cool, edgy guy who barely shows any emotions, but when he does, it hits extremely hard because you know it had to take a lot to get to that point. But again, it just works and flows extremely well here. As I mentioned before, the author doesn't shove it down your throat. Chihiro is obviously cool and he's obviously very stoic, but the series isn't just focused on that. It isn't unbearable to read because it's not obnoxious. So, without completely spoiling the narrative for potential future readers, yes, I do believe the narrative here is actually pretty strong. And if anything, it is extremely compelling to keep reading along with. So, the final question. The question that this video has been all about. Is Kagurabachi actually any good? Was the meme just a meme because of the bad quality of the manga? Nah. I think the meme was funny just because of how random the whole thing was at the time. Kagurabachi is actually pretty solid, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone who is a fan of battle shonen manga. Now, would I recommend it to someone with elitist taste in manga? Someone who dissects every aspect of a story, expecting the greatest thing they've ever read? Probably not, but that doesn't mean Kagurabachi doesn't have a compelling story. So, if you're watching this video and you haven't read Kagurabachi, let me know in the comments if this persuaded you. And if you have read Kagurabachi and would like me to give a more detailed breakdown of the series, because I have read every chapter up until this point, also let me know down below in the comments. With all that being said, don't forget to like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, thank you so much for watching. Until next time.